The next question for Power BI interview is, what do you understand by Power BI service? With this question, interviewer is trying to understand how much or what do you know about Power BI service. Now let's get started. Again, as I always say, do not try to provide theoretical answers. If you know the basics, be honest with it and try to communicate whatever you know. Okay. Now, point that we can talk about is Power BI service is a cloud-based platform. So whenever you work on any report or a dashboard, right, within Power BI desktop, after creating that dashboard, what do? You publish that report. Okay, where does it get published? It gets published to Power BI service. Now when we upload these data or these dashboards to Power BI service, it must be stored somewhere. All right, where do you think it gets stored? It is stored on cloud. It is stored on cloud. And as you all know that Power BI is a Microsoft product, which implies that data must be getting stored somewhere in the Microsoft Azure, right? Again, we will get into the details, how exactly the data gets. We have a separate question for that. At this point of time, from this, we can easily say that Power BI service is a cloud-based platform, which also implies that if we store the data or when we publish the data to Power BI service, you do not need on-premise infrastructure because it is already hosted on cloud. So the first point that we talked about is Power BI service is a cloud-based platform. The second point that we would be talking about Power BI service is reports and dashboard sharing. Now, what do you mean by reports and dashboard sharing? So let's say we have uploaded the data to Power BI service, right? Now, what are we going to do with that data? It's important that we share this data with our colleagues, reporting manager, whoever we want to share within the organization or outside the organization. Okay, it's important that we share the data. How do we share the data? We share the data through Power BI service, whether we share the link or we share the emails, in whichever way, right? So the point that I'm trying to make is that Power BI service would help you for the report and dashboard sharing. The next point that I want to talk about regarding the Power BI service is that collaboration. Now, what do you mean by collaboration? Power BI service basically allows multiple users to collaborate on a project. So how does the collaboration help? Suppose there are multiple members of your team who are working on the same report or the dashboard. Now, with the help of Power BI service, collaboration functionality. So when I say collaboration functionality, that means it allows you to collaborate. When I say collaborate, that means if there is a report, same report can be viewed by multiple people at the same time. All right, what can you do with that? Let's say there are multiple guys watching the same report, and if there is something that you want to highlight, you can put a comment or ask a question based on that graph to your colleagues or whoever you want to, right? It is just like, it is similar to what you do on social media. If there is a post, you guys put a comment, right, and you guys ask questions or whatever it is, right? So you guys can do the same thing using the Power BI service as well. That's why the third point that we talked about is collaboration. It allows multiple people to work on the same report or a dashboard. The next point that we would be talking about is data refresh. So Power BI service helps us for a data refresh. When I say data refresh, now just imagine there is a Power BI service. Within Power BI service, you are published a report. Now let's say that for this report, the database or the data set or the data source you guys have used is, let's say, this server. Okay, SQL server is the data source for the data. Now there is some changes in the data. Okay, now the same changes should be reflected to you within the Power BI service as well, right? So the moment there is a data update within the SQL server or SQL server, at the same time, same thing, same data changes should be reflected in your reports as well. That is enabled by Power BI service. Speaking of data refresh, there is no fixed way, right? You guys, I mean, depending upon the business requirement, you can set multiple refresh, right? If you want to, let's say, refresh the data only once a day, 6 o'clock, you can set that. If you want multiple refresh, let's say you want to refresh the data every 3 years, it will happen, right? Depending upon your requirement, you can do that. But if you are, let's say, using a free version, in that case there is a restriction that you can refresh the data only once a day, that is 24 hours. Okay, Otherwise, but let's say if you want to have the multiple refresh, then what you can do is you can use the Power BI. In that case, you can use the Power BI service premium version. Okay. So the next point that we would be talking about is security and governance. Now, speaking of security and governance, how do you think would Power BI service help? So you already know that Power BI is a Microsoft Azure product, so Microsoft product, right? So for the Power BI service, like we can have the Azure AD authentication, right? This authentication would allow only the authorized users to have the access of the data, or have the access of the reports or the dashboards you have published on Power BI service. Second thing we can talk about security is that based on so you can also provide, so there is a concept of row level security, for which also I have created a separate video. You can watch that as well. So in that video also I have talked about how row level security, how using row level security you can create a specific role based on the requirement, and based on the roles user would be accessing only the data that they are authorized to, right? I think I had given a very simple example. The next point that I want to talk about is mobile access. Now the next point that I want to talk about is mobile access. Using Power BI service, you can access the reports and dashboard through the mobile apps on whether it's iOS or Android mobiles. You can access those dashboard using Power BI service. Okay. So basically Power BI service allows us or helps us to have the access to the dashboard and report through mobile as well. The next point that I want to talk about, and I feel this is the most important point, that is APIs and integration. Okay, let's talk about APIs and integration first. Now, this is the most important feature of Power BI service. Now, what do you mean by APIs and integration? So, let's say you are using Power BI service, and let's say you are working in an organization wherein there are different data sets. When I say different data set, let's say for the ERP data, you have got SAP system. Let's say you have got sales data which is stored in the SQL server, and then there are again users data, or let's say there is some other kind of a data which is stored in Excel. Okay. Now that means the data that you want to import belongs to three different sources. One of them is in Excel, the other one is in SAP, and the third one is in SQL Server. Now Power BI has got APIs and integration capabilities. So basically what happens is Power BI can have an integration with these tools, and with the help of this integration Power BI would be able to fetch the data from these different sources. So even if there are three different sources, still we are able to fetch the data, and still we are able to make the reports out of it, because Power BI has got these APIs and integration abilities. Okay, these APIs basically helps to integrate with these tools as well. So when asked about your understanding for Power BI service, it is not mandatory that you talk about all these functionalities, but you can do your research, read about it, learn more about it, and based on your understanding, whatever you know, you can communicate that to interviewer. Okay, thank you so much for watching.